What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're doing a deck profile of a deck that I think is kind of ironic the way that it came to the meta, and I'm taking a look at Numerons. So before Zexal was banned, nobody was actually playing the deck. They tried it at first, but they felt like it was very lackluster, so pretty much everyone discarded it for maybe a Dragoon engine or Dogmatica engine, and nobody was playing it. But now that Zexal got banned, people were reminded that the deck existed, and they gave it one more attempt at making it a good deck, and actually these days OTK variants of the deck have been topping, so I felt like now the deck is exactly how it was supposed to be. Zexal control was not the intended way of the deck to be functioning, but now an OTK deck that is very similar to the Grand Mage deck we used to have, but a much more consistent version of the deck because you can OTK with just one card, so the rest of your deck can be whatever you want, combat the meta that you're playing, if you know you're going to be facing certain decks and you can adapt to that, or you can pretty much play a main deck anything you want to face any kind of meta deck because you have so much free space. So this is my take on the deck. I think it's a very fun deck if you enjoy a deck that just wins games right away. So maybe if you want to win fast, then this is the deck for you. So before beginning with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off with the monsters, play of course 3 copies of Numeron Wall. This card gets you to your Numeron network, but it also has an effect that a lot of people forget about, and it's actually an effect that can save you so many times. So it's basically a battle fader-like card. If you take battle damage, then you can special summon this from your hand and then end the battle phase. So not only are you ending the battle phase, but the card doesn't go to the grave or anything, it stays on the field. And its effect states that you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave to activate Numeron Network from your deck or your hand if you control no cards, except this card. If this is the only card on your field, then you can just use this effect. So you stop your opponent's battle phase, and if they don't have anything to stop this effect, then you can just OTK them right after with Numeron Network. So maybe if they think that they can OTK you really fast because you know that activating Numeron Network turn 1 might not be the best play against some decks, because now without Zexal, it's not like you can make an insane board by just activating Numeron Network and completely stopping your opponent's turn. The best thing you can do turn 1 is maybe an Appaloosa, but that's not very consistent negation against decks like Dragon Link, which has so many ways to bait out negates. So maybe if you just stall out with your hand drops a little bit, and then you can use Numeron Wall at the correct time when your opponent has committed to maybe an OTK rather than making the optimal board, then this is how you surprise your opponent and kill them in one turn. 2 copies of Planet Pathfinder. I find that sometimes, even with all the cards I'm playing for Numeron Network, I still don't see it, and if you're playing this deck, then if you're not seeing Numeron Network, then you can't do anything, because it's the only win condition of the deck. You don't play Eldritch, you don't play Subterrors, you don't play anything else, it's just a pure Numeron deck at that point. So I feel like even if this card contradicts with the next card I'm going to show you, it's better just to have the option in the deck to make the deck a little bit more consistent in case I don't see Numeron Network, because you're not going to see the next card with Planet Pathfinder every single game. I mean, it's only 2 copies of Pathfinder and the next card is a 3 of, so it's not like you're going to be seeing them every single time, so they can be contradicting each other. So I feel like this extra bit of consistency, especially with Terraforming being at 1, this you have to play, because if you don't see Network, you are not going to do anything. So yep, I highly recommend playing at least 2 copies of Pathfinder. 3 might be too many, but 2 are just fine. 3 copies of Lava Golem. This is a card I said that might contradict with Pathfinder, but still is such a good card. This card is a much better card than Sphere Mode in this deck, because you can actually attack it. If you use Sphere Mode, it has the same restriction, but you cannot run over Sphere Mode with your Numeron, so it's not like you're going to OTK, but Lava Golem you can attack, so this is why it's a much better card. And against decks like Dragon Link or pretty much any combo based, especially with a card like Bastard being back in the format, you have to get rid of it if you want to play, because your gates are monsters from the extra deck, so it's not like you're going to be able to play if Bastard is on the field. And cards like Droplet or Dark Ruler No More cannot help you against like that, because even if you manage with the negates that your opponent has on the field, Bastard is an equipped spell, so it's not like negating a monster will do you any good. You have to get rid of that monster, so this is why I really like playing Lava Golem in the deck. For the same logic, I also main deck 3 copies of Gameciel. I think you need something extra in order to deal with something like that, because just relying on Lava Golem is not that great. You could argue playing the spell Dark Spirit's Mastery that searches Lava Golem. The problem with that is that your opponent can negate it, so if you have a Savage with a Bastard Lock and you activate this trying to search a Lava Golem, they probably know what you're up to, so there's no way they're going to get it. They weren't allowed to, you get it. So playing 3 copies of Gameciel, maybe not as strong as Lava Golem, but still a more of insurance plan to get rid of Bastard Lock or any monster that has problems that you have problems dealing with, aside from trying to search it and the card getting outright negated, because there's no way you can negate the Kaijus unless your opponent has something like a Vanity's Ruler on the field and you are not able to play, but you do play other cards in your deck to be able to deal with that. For the hand drops, play 3 copies of Ash Blossom, of course, it's the most generic hand drop, and I also play 3 copies of Gamma with 1 copy of Driver. I really like this card because it's a good card to top deck even after your opponent has set up everything. This card is good because after you activate Numeron Network, if your opponent tries tries to negate, they are going to negate the activation of the effect of the Numeron network, not the activation of the card. So they're going to wait until you send your Numeron calling to the grave to use something like a Savage or something like an Infinity, and then even if you use Gamma, you can still get all of the gates on the field, because you get 2 monsters on the field with Gamma, you can summon 3 gates in the main monster zones and the 4th gate in the extra monster zone, so you can have 6 monsters and you're still able to OTK, and it's not like Gamma interacts any badly with the restriction of Numeron calling, because you are not summoning anything after you've summoned the gates, you're summoning something before you've summoned the gates, while still having activated the effect that requires you to have no monsters on the field, so it's a perfectly balanced combo that you can use in your advantage in order to make your play more safe. For the spells, play 3 copies of Numeron Network. Of course, as long as you have Numeron Network in your hand or your deck with a Numeron calling, then you're good to go. If you run out of any of them, then you're going to lose, because there's nothing you can do to combat a deck like that, unless you cheesy win with Lava Golem's Burn. If it's that late in the game, it will hardly ever happen, but it's a possibility. 3 copies of Numeron Calling. In any version before the ban list, you were playing 2 or maybe even 1. But in a pure version, you have to play 3, because sometimes your opponent might be able to survive the TK, you might go first, and you have to use a calling turn 1 in order to make some kind of board. So you need to play 3 copies. It's the only play you have, so you need to be able to use it as many times as possible. Of course, you max out all the gates in the extra deck as well, in order to be able to summon all 4 of them 3 times, and this is why I think you have to play 3 calling, because if you don't have it, you don't have anything to do. 1 copy of Terraforming, of course, 1 copy of Set Rotation with 1 copy of Midbreaker Field. This can also shut down some decks that use field spells, because some Dino variants use Diagram, not many of them, but it's a possibility. So I think it's the best field spell to play with Set Rotation. You can play stuff like Gateway to Chaos or the Zephyr field spell if you want, it's pretty much the same. But if your opponent activates Midbreaker Field, they might think that they're protecting themselves from something, but what they're doing is giving you a protection yourself, because you're not playing anything in your deck that targets a monster in the main phase. So you don't really care if your opponent activates Midbreaker Field if they don't have a field spell in the deck. 1 copy of 1-for-1, a consistency boost because of Numeron Wall. It's just another way to get access to your Numeron network, and you do play a fair share of monsters, because if you draw like 2 Lava Golems or 2 Gameciels, you don't really want to summon your Gameciel in your field, because that will not have a good interaction with your Numeron network. You cannot use second Lava Golem very well, so this is why you might as well discard it for a 1-for-1. 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. This card is insane. You have to pretty much negate everything in order to go for the ATK, and the good thing about this card is not only it negates the effects, but it also cuts the attack in half, so it makes your life so much easier, because your Morden's Masters might be too high in order for you to ATK with a 4,000 and 8,000 attack, but if you cut the attack in half, then there's absolutely no way that you're not ATKing. 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. I have this here mainly for Dragoon, because this deck struggles against Dragoon a lot, because it's not like you can use a lot of stuff to negate it. So if your opponent plays Subterror and they only have a Dragoon on the field, unless you draw a Gameciel, then you cannot really deal with it, because you can only use Droplet. But the problem with Droplets is that they might have something like a Solemn Judgment in that deck, so it might be a little bit difficult to negate that. And if they haven't set the Guru, then your Lava Golem is dead, because they don't have 2 monsters on the field. So this is why TTT is actually a good card, because they're absolutely going to negate Network or Calling. They're absolutely going to, because if they don't, then you can just overlay, and then you could just link all of these into a Mega Clops without having Dragoon gain 1,000 attack or anything, and you're just going to run over it. So after they use it, then you can take it with TTT, and then it's pretty much, you can just blow them out with this. So this is why you need to play something like that in the deck. And if your opponent doesn't have something like that threatening as Dragoon, then the draw 2 effect is actually really nice as well. I do main deck a lot of back removal in the deck, because a deck like Eldritch, the only way that it tries to stop the deck is by trying to pop the Numeron network on the battle phase with Conquistador, and if you do that, you cannot actually use the Gates effects, because the only reason they are able to activate their effects without using overlay units is because Network is on the field and it has that effect. So if they deal with a field spell, if they know what they're doing and they deal with a field spell, then your Gates are pretty much vanillas that you have to use for a Link Must Summon afterwards. So you do have to play a lot of back removal just to be able to combat Eldritch or any control deck at all. If your opponent knows what they're doing, they're going to be able to stop you very, very easily. So I do play 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. It's the best one because it banishes the eldest cards altogether. 2 copies of Twin Twisters just to be able to hit more back row, and it's better against Subterrors and Ultra guys, and it's with Eldritch because Eldritch cards will float. But the thing is that even if they do float, they might not even reach that point, because you do try to kill them in 1 turn. Another problem you might have against Eldritch is that your opponent might not have any monsters on the field, especially if they're playing pure Eldritch, which I don't know, I know a lot of people don't. They might have a zoo on the field or something like that, but still, sometimes you need to be able to just make some monsters and grind your opponent, because if your opponent doesn't have any monsters on the field, then you cannot OTK, because you cannot boost your gates. They only boost themselves after they battle with a monster. So this is why having backward removal can be very helpful for that too. 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Of course, you need to play it. It's out of the list. I'm not including Lightning Storm because I try to make the deck as budget as possible, because I know a lot of people are using this as a budget deck, because it was a little bit expensive in pre-orders when we thought that Numeron was going to be the big hot stuff stuff that we didn't really get, but now it's a very budget deck, so if you have access to Lightning Storm, of course, you can play that as well, because it's a much better card than any of the ones I showed you, because it deals with monsters as well, but I tried to make it as budget-friendly as possible, so that's why I'm not including it, but of course, if you have it, go ahead and play it. And one copy of Red Reboot, which I would recommend playing anyway, even if you still have Lightning Storm, because it's the only guarantee pattern that you're going to win against the backer deck, because all the other stuff can be very, very problematic sometimes. Maybe your opponent has an Imperial Order, but Red Reboot, unless they have a Solemn Judgment, they're going to lose altogether. For the extra deck, play, of course, 3 copies of each of the Numeron gates. Play 3 copies of Numeron Gate Ekam, number 1, 3 copies of number 2, Numeron Gate Dve, 3 copies of number 3, Numeron Gate Trini, and 3 copies of number 4, Numeron Gate Atvari. So, you summon all of them. Even if you go first, you do summon all of them now, because your main goal is to summon Apollousa turn 1 if you think that it's going to help you against your opponent's deck. Before, when you would summon Zexal, you would not summon all 4, because you would be able to get Nibiru when you summon Zexal, because it would be the 5th summon, but if you summon 3, it would be the 4th. Now, if you get Nibiru, no big deal, because Apollousa is your 5th summon, so you can just negate Nibiru, but you will have 1 less negate, but that's all good. So, the main reason you're playing all 4 of them is because you want to be able to summon all 4 of them 3 times with Numero Calling for the grind game. It's the only way you can actually outgrind your opponent, because sometimes the OTK might not succeed. It's going to happen a lot of the time, so you need to be able to outgrind, especially against control decks, because even with all those backer removals, there are some hands that you're not going to draw them. So you need to be able to summon them as many times as possible in order to be able to keep up, otherwise you're going to get outgrinded very, very easily by a deck like Subterror, Altergeist, or maybe even Endlich. I do play 1 copy of number Chaos 1, number Chaos Gate Sunya. So this card, you hardly ever summon it, but I like having the option, because sometimes you want to board wipe, and Megaclops is not a good card against certain decks, so it's not like summoning it will win you the game. Against some decks it will, but some others it won't. So this card is a really good board wipe, and what I said before with Wall is actually the main interaction with this card. So you want to be able to summon this if you have a Wall in your hand, because if you don't, you're going to get OTK'd very, very easily. But if you can actually survive a turn with Numeron Wall and this card comes back, maybe you can cheese a win with its burn effect. So it's actually an effect that can catch your opponents off guard and give you some free wins. So this is why I think just having in the extra deck, even though you're not going to summon it a lot of the times, then it's just good because you don't have anything else you want to play in the extra deck. And I only play 2 Link monsters. First one is of course Megaclops. Megaclops, unfortunately, now without Zexal, you cannot really use its effect, because before you were usually summoning Zexal first, and after that with a second Numeron Calling you were summoning Megaclops, and Megaclops could revive Zexal, because Zexal was a properly Xyz summoned monster. The problem with the gates is that they're not Xyz summoned, they're actually summoned with a card effect, so after they go to the grave you cannot revive them. So in this deck you are never going to use Megaclops' second effect to bring back an Xyz and attach an opponent's card to it as material. It's just here because it can win games on its own against certain decks. So if you know what your opponent is playing and you know that they don't have an out, then it's very easy to just drop a Megaclops turn 1 and you're going to win just like that. But in case your opponent has an out, then here's Apollousa. Apollousa is the one that's the most foolproof monster, especially if you don't know what you're playing against. It's better to just summon Apollousa and hope that your opponent doesn't have a lot of ways to bait her negates, because even if you know what your opponent is playing and you know that the archetype doesn't have an out for Megaclops, maybe they have a card like Impermanence or a Dark Lord No More or a Droplet, so it's not like a card that is guaranteeing you a win even if the archetype your opponent is playing doesn't have an inherent out, because there are so many generic cards that can deal with Megaclops. So this is why it's a very, very risky card to summon, especially early in the game. So this is why Apollousa is a much better option if you plan on going first, but because it's most likely because your opponent made you go first, because you're blinding second with this deck, of course. You can play Underworld Goddess of the Closed War as well. This is another card, because if your calling resolves and you get 4 gates on the field, you just can get rid of another one of your opponent's monsters with the Underworld Goddess for link 5, but that doesn't allow you to OTK because you send all your gates to the grave, so I don't think it's a very optimal card, but if you think it's good, then you can play it, of course. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Numeron, a deck that people didn't think was good, and now that it actually is supposed to be weaker than when it used to be, people have started playing it and having more success with it. So yep, that's just Yu-Gi-Oh! You never know what you're gonna find in a format, because people experiment all the time. Stuff that people thought they were bad before, after a ban list, even though they were supposed to get weakened by the ban list, they think it's better now because they have found more optimal ways to play them, or maybe the format is more optimal for that certain deck. So yeah, never give up on a deck. It might get good eventually, it might get support, people might innovate, they might make it much, much better than you think it is. So yeah, any deck can be playable at the right hands with the right pilot. So yeah, that's the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.